I have a friend who was, when I was a resident in medicine, medical resident, who said, you know, Dr. Greer, your problem, because we call each other doctor, that's just joking. You know, Dr. Greer, your problem is you think you're a normal person screwing up, when in reality, you're a screwed up person doing very well. And I thought, no truer words were ever spoken. And so, you know, here I am, this kid, and so these divine beings, there were two of them. Both were like universal avatar essences of consciousness. And I said, well, you want me to come with you, or should I go back to Earth? And they said, well, we want you to go back. And I went, oh. And I said, I had enough presence of mind to say, thy will be done, sort of thing. So I said, okay. So with that, I sort of came back, and I awakened in my body. Now, at that point, I had your classic paralysis where I couldn't move. I said, oh, great. Now I'm back in this shell of a body. I've just left this beautiful divine realm of consciousness and light, and I'm stuck as a paralyzed 17-year-old. But I couldn't move my body. I couldn't move a hand. I couldn't move anything. But my eyes were open. But I could hear. I could see. My senses were there, but I couldn't move. I went, oh boy, am I in trouble now? I'm living by myself in this little studio apartment, $75 a month, including utilities. It was a dump. Anyway. So here we are. So I'm in this state, and then all of a sudden something comes beside me, and it's a test, and it's a being that I could sense came beside me, and was sort of pulling me out of my body, and I had to see if I had enough will to stay, that I had the will to live. That part was a little freaky. I have to say it was a little bit, because basically what that being was there for is say, do you have the will to stay here and do what you're supposed to do here? So I was there in that state, and it went back and forth, out of my body, in my body, 4 or 5 times. I don't know how many times. And finally, I said, yes, I'm going to stay here, because that's what I was told Spirit wanted me to do. So I stayed. And then I began to be able to move and walk and got up. And all this, the infection I had, now I still have a hole in my leg right here, sort of a big indented area where I lost a lot of this thigh muscle. But I was healed. I never saw a doctor. And the reason I had not gone to see one is that I had no insurance and I was poor. And so I just didn't go see one. You know, at $1.60 an hour, it's tough to go see a doctor, which is what the minimum wage was back then. So I thought to myself, well, you know, what do I do now? So I sort of filed that away. That was in March of '73. A couple months later, I learned of a program for meditation where you could begin to experience cosmic consciousness in a meditative state. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. So I took my mother. I said, why don't we go to this? So I took my mother, and she couldn't afford it either, but I got a student rate, so I took the course and started studying all these sort of concepts of higher states of consciousness, the Vedas. You know, the Vedas, the ancient writings from India, predate Hinduism, by the way. I began to study from every culture in the world, native cultures, ancient Christian, you name it, the concepts of spirit and consciousness. And so I learned some meditation techniques and went on this path of exploring consciousness as a 17-year-old. In fact, well, let me correct that. It was on my 18th birthday that I learned this to do mantra Vedic meditation. And it's kind of a funny story, because later I became a meditation teacher before I was a medical doctor. In my misspent youth, when everyone else was running around drunk and chasing skirts, I was in an ashram meditating 8 hours a day. So I went to this instruction course, and it was one-on-one. And I sat down to meditate, and I was there with the mantra. And I went very deep and very quiet, and then I transcended into the unbounded mind, just pure mind. It's pure consciousness, not defined by space, time, thoughts, or ego. It's just pure consciousness. Beautiful. And after this, about 20 minutes, the meditation ended, and my instructor looked at me and said, "You transcended into cosmic consciousness, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, isn't that what we were supposed to do?" I didn't understand that you were supposed to make a big geschrei about this, and make a big deal, and be on a bed of nails or something for 40 years. So I'm very irreverent, you'll find. Anyway, but I'm going, all that stuff. So I said, well, yeah, and that's what we're supposed to do. You just connect to the mind whereby you're conscious and transcend. So he says, yeah, but most people, I said, well, that was great. So I began to practice that. 4 months later, in October '73, I'm up on a mountain in North Carolina. And so I've carried this near-death experience with me into my first year of college. And so I'm absorbed totally in wanting to be in the mountains of North Carolina, where it's peaceful and pure energy, away from humans as much as possible, and just be in consciousness and the purity of Gaia, the purity of the Earth Spirit. And my grandmother was Cherokee Indian, so I have this deep connection to Earth. And I was up on this mountain called Riches Mountain outside a little town called Boone, North Carolina, named after Daniel Boone. And I was up on this mountain, way at about 5,200 feet, I think it is, at the base of what they call a fartar. Now, you would say fire tower, but they say a fartar. So I went, this is North Carolina, so I'm up at the fartar, and so at the base of the fartar was a place to sit on some rocks. And so I got there just before sunset, and I saw this beautiful, the sun was just going down, and there was this beautiful disc, an ET craft that materialized. Boop. And it was exactly the one I saw when I was 8 or 9, and they were back. So I just sort of acknowledged them, sort of, oh, you're back, how beautiful. So I just sat and meditated. So I went into this deep meditation. And at the conclusion of the meditation, which I thought was 20, 30 minutes, it turned out it was much longer, deeper. I just went into this transcendental state of pure, quiet mind. At the end of it, I opened my eyes, and as I did, I stood up and looked, and you could see the whole Milky Way galaxy from horizon to horizon up at that altitude, crystal clear. Quite chilly up at that altitude that time of year. And I had a ski jacket on, and a beautiful thought of, actually it was a thought sent into me from beyond that said, behold what a beautiful universe God has made. Bang. At that instant, those words, I went right back to the near death. And beautiful. But I wasn't dead, I was in my body. So I'm walking around, and it's beautiful. So I think, wow, I'm having this near-death experience, but I still have this. So I thought, wow, this is how life ought to be on Earth. Well, very emotional. Just at that moment, this little guy, I don't know if it's a guy or a girl, comes over and is about this tall, touches me on my right shoulder. So I'm wearing a ski jacket. It's kind of puffy, you know how they are. And I see the jacket indent like this, and my shoulder's touched. And when I'm touched, there's an electromagnetic static discharge that builds around me. And all of my hair stood on end. And I had hair then. I mean, I had kind of long hair. And it was, unlike now, but it went whoop. And, and my arm hair was all standing on end. And with that, I dematerialized onto that ship for, I'm saying 3 to 4 hours, because I wasn't returned to the top of the mountain until midnight or so. And I was in this state of consciousness on this spacecraft with multiple civilizations co-creating what we now call the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocols, the techniques for making contact using consciousness. Now, it was a very strange experience because people say, what'd you talk about? It wasn't like, hey, come over, we're going to have some bagels and lox and, and chat about who ran for president and other bullshit, frankly. It was very much being in that state of consciousness with them, in a sort of where information was conveyed in nonverbal packets of knowing. Does that make sense? Knowing, pre-verbal, not monkey chatter. Not this, not what we're doing right now, but the essence of knowledge that's pre-verbal. That's deep communication. So as this was going forward, I began to realize that the only reason they were interested in me was that I'd had that experience and embraced it and understood that consciousness, this unbounded, pure field of awareness that's within every single person, moreover, within every single thing, is the key, the Rosetta Stone to interstellar contact and communication. It is the science of the next millennium. So that's what we want to talk about today. So that's kind of my introduction. And I know it's a little bit of a personal story, but I mean, I want to make this real. It's very real for me why I'm still doing this. A lot of people say, what causes a medical doctor to leave his medical career to do something like this? That is enough to make you leave your medical career. Because in 1990, I was revisited by these civilizations when I was working as a doctor, and they said, pick up that which you have dropped. Those are the exact words that were spoken to me in my bedroom in North Carolina next to the Biltmore Castle, Biltmore House, where I used to live in Biltmore Forest. And I thought to myself, okay, now it's time. I was wondering what would happen between 1973 and 1990. So all that I was living with doing this, I was keeping it to myself and a few close friends. And then I was kind of told, now it's time to share this information and connect some dots for people on this issue. And so in 1990, I started the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and CSETI. And I began to just speak of the concepts of using consciousness and non-locality of mind and coherent thought to make contact with these civilizations within the construct, ethical construct of universal peace. That's what we really want to talk about, because there are retrograde interests that are trying to drag us into endless war. And it is already time that we establish on this planet and on others universal peace.
On your screen. With us now from Washington is Stephen Bassett, founder and executive director of the Extraterrestrial Phenomena Political Action Committee. Last time he was here, he was running for Congress, was unsuccessful in that venture. But I will ask you today, sir, the Mexican government, the Mexican military says, hey, we took these pictures, these are UFOs. What was that, do you know?
This is significant for two reasons, Shepard. One, this is released by the Defense Ministry of Mexico. This is a message being sent to the United States government that Mexico and many other governments are losing patience with our government's intransigence in ending this embargo. Other messages have been sent by France in 1999 with the Cometa report, and by the United Kingdom when they released a substantial number of documents regarding the Bentwaters case in 2000. Many countries know about the extraterrestrial presence, but they've deferred to the United States with regard to the timing of when disclosure would take place, but they're simply losing patience.
How do we know this, by the way?
Well, we know it by paying attention. I've been following this now for 10 years. We call it the politics of disclosure, the disclosure process. Hundreds of government witnesses in this country have come forward, and other governments are putting pressure on our government. The media hasn't covered it thoroughly enough, Shepard. If it did, it would learn about some of the things I'm mentioning here, and also learn about thousands of other videos and photographs that have been taken over Mexico by Mexican citizens since 1991.
There's absolutely no question about that, and his number, thousands, is accurate since 1991. Thousands of pictures and videotapes of discs, but never anything like this, taken by such sophisticated cameras on board military vehicles.
Oh, there's been plenty of...
But not as clear and widespread as this, and government confirmed in this way. I'm just saying that these are unusual in that
Oh, no,
way.
it's happened many times before, but this is the first time it's been released. Believe me, there is evidence like this in the archives of every major first world government in the country, but they release this publicly in a news conference in Mexico City. That's the difference.
Studies have been done that, quote, clearly indicate the likelihood of an extraterrestrial explanation. But there are people sitting out there, I'm hoping there are millions of people watching at the moment, who are saying, this is nutty. Why, you know, why do we even talk about such things?
The polls show otherwise, Shepard. CNN, Time, Reuters polls, last 10 years, confirmed, convinced that the extraterrestrial presence explains this phenomena. Disclosure is at hand. It is very close, and the American people need to prepare themselves very soon for an announcement from our government that there is, in fact, an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet and the human race.
All right. Well, there you have it. Very interesting. Thank you. We'll try to find out more about the lights, and the next time there's a congressman around, I'll ask him. Probably not on the camera, but I'll ask him off the camera. So there's something to feed on.
A las 7, a la misma altura.
Hay unas nubes, ahí se debe de ver esto.
Pero, a ver, busquen eso que viene atrás de nosotros.
Ve cómo se ve como en dos faros.
Viene como a las 7, 8 de la posición. Lo raro es que trae una punta adelante.
¿Hay algo?
Puntito adelante.
A ver, ¿qué tenemos?
Nada, señor. A ver, permítame, déjale busco.
¿Y nosotros?
Comandante, ¿qué es eso?
¿Qué distancia más o menos lo tenías, Telles?
Oye, a ver, abusados, es como...
Ahí van más. Van más, siguen más atrás. Son 10, 11 objetos.
Son muchos objetos.
Afirmativo. Ahí van. Va, uno. Y ahí van los atrás. Siguientes.
¿Qué es eso? Dios mío.
¿Se anda correteando?
¿Qué es eso? A ver, trata de enfocar.
Máximo.
Ok, no dejes que los dejes atrás. Ok.
Van.
Sigue ese, no lo dejes,
No,
Telles.
van todos, van aproximadamente
Ay, cabrón,
como 10.
como
¿Ya lo dio?
4.
¿Ya lo dio? Y van pasando.
Tú mandas, no lo pierdas.
Sí. Ahí van.
Ahí van. 3, 4, 5, 6. Son 6.
¿Abajo o arriba o arriba?
En medio, ahí van.
Ahí van a ir 1, 2, 3,
la misma
4,
altura.
5.
Qué barbaridad, ¿eh?
Ahí se van a ver bien. Y van a una velocidad, pero... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 en la pantalla.
Síguelo, no lo cierras.
¿Están a la misma altura, Telles?
Afirmativo.
Poquito,
Arribita.
arriba.
8, 9, 10, 11 contando toda la cola. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11.
Ok, no sabemos qué estamos viendo, son unos objetos nada más luminosos que vienen a la misma altura que nosotros, pero no podemos saber qué distancia. ¿Por qué nos vienen siguiendo?
The Mexican Air Force has released a video that some of you are going to find difficult to believe. A journalist says it shows images of UFOs tracking a Mexican military plane. He says Mexico's defense secretary gave him the video, which was allegedly taken by the pilot during a patrol. The pilot says up to 16 lights were tracking his aircraft. The Mexican defense secretary says images like these have never been released to the public by the armed forces of any country.
And they're saying scientists can look at them and try to figure out what they think, if they're really, really UFO.
We had heard of course, the crop circles, and our assessment was that from various reports there was an aerial phenomenon component to it, some type of what we considered probable extraterrestrial activity. And so we had a team come here in 92, 93, 94, and again this year in 1995 to do research in the area, but particularly geared towards moving beyond just a sky watch, but trying to actually make contact with whoever were making these crop circles in some sort of a context of interspecies communications and relations. So we had a team set up in the farm there below Woodborough Hill, and had been out several nights prior to the night that you mentioned on July 26th. It was actually significant that 2 nights prior to that, on the 24th, just after sunset, with the sky still having a very crystal clear blue quality to it, between 10 and 10:30, a disc-shaped craft catapulted through the zenith of the sky, covering about, I would say, somewhere around 30 degrees of arc, and was quite low, actually, and quite clear, because the air was crystal clear. And you could see the lights going around it counterclockwise in this very unusual pattern. It started raining because we were in a field and the cars were on this dirt track that would become very difficult to pass. Most people left. There were 4 people who however, remained behind. I was one of them, and then 3 other members of the team. We went to a paved road on the farm that we were working on there in Alton Barnes, and we're waiting out this rain, which was really quite torrential at times. And at about 12:20 a.m. on the 27th, the wee hours, of course, it's the same night of the 26th, just past midnight, there was a extraordinary event that then began. We had a member of the team who was in a car behind mine come running around, beating on the windows, and I opened it, and he said, "There's a spaceship coming through the field." And I said, well, I thought he was joking, of course, and I turned, and not far above the field, perhaps 10 feet, was a approximately 100 to 150 foot diameter disc with lights going around counterclockwise, with a sort of a cone or dome on top, with 3 lights on the top of it, 3 or 4 amber lights. Now the lights that were going around counterclockwise were identical, and the shape of this craft was identical to the object that came straight overhead on the 24th at about between 10.
This whole cover-up from the very beginning. They have one of the finest national security intelligence operations on the planet. I mean, a retired Soviet KGB general by the name of Oleg Kalugin, who is now living in Washington, D.C., and he's an advisor and some of our people in government. Oleg Kalugin said, if we had had the intelligence operations in the Soviet Union as good as the one at the Vatican, the Cold War would still be going on. The Berlin Wall would have not fallen, and the Soviet Union would still exist. He says, we always knew that the best damn security intelligence operation on the planet was out of the Vatican. And probably the reason is that every damn priest in every country on the planet, Catholic priest, is in a sense an agent of the Vatican Intelligence Secret Service. And they're deeply concerned about the location and the appearance in our solar system of a planet known as Nibiru, which has already been photographed, and I have a picture of it here in a moment to share with you. The 10th planet has been photographed by an astro, what do they call them, where the telescopes are? Well, anyhow, they've taken pictures of the damn thing in southern Chile because it has appeared below the ecliptic in the southern hemisphere. It's already been photographed by at least 3 cameras, telescopes, It's one of the biggest secrets in our government today. The reality and the presence of the 10th planet. Our government has known about it since 1980. Anyhow, it's real, it's there, and we're going to see it up here. I've been involved in this whole thing for 40 years, and I've been deeply involved in it for the last 20. And let me tell you, take it for what it's worth, in my view, there ain't going to be no disclosure. Not like they expect. They expect the government to someday have a news conference and stand up and say, hey, we got a little surprise for you. Guess what? We've been keeping it from you. We're sorry about that, but it was for your own good, you know. You guys weren't ready for this. You probably couldn't handle it. So, but now we're going to tell you, oh yes, aliens are here. They've been here for quite a while. They're all over the place. Well, they are indeed all over the damn place. But you're not going to get a government disclosure because that's not how government works. First of all, they're a bunch of nitwits in some cases. They're not capable of giving you a disclosure and doing it in a sensible, thoughtful, caring way. For a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that they don't want to admit to you they've been lying to you for over 60 years. And then the other thing is that they are really a little bit uncertain and frightened themselves because the true scope of their awareness and what they know still has them in a state of shock. An event took place in California in 1954 at an Air Force base known as Muroc. This event had been planned and orchestrated by sensitive military, primarily naval individuals. And what it was essentially is that Eisenhower got aboard his plane, went out to this Muroc Air Force Base with a whole passel of guys from his administration, and including the Archbishop or Cardinal or Bishop of Los Angeles, a guy by the name of McIntyre. And this thing had been orchestrated and organized for some time because there had been communications between individuals in naval intelligence. And I say naval, and I say this again and again and again. My kid retired as a senior officer from the Navy just in November. The Navy has been up to here, this whole program from the very beginning, and they actually run the operation over at Groom Lake at S4. Anyhow, this event took place. I've had verification and proof that it actually transpired from sources impeccable. They flew Ike out there. Supposedly he was visiting a dentist. He had a problem. Well, bless his heart, he really did have a problem. When this was over, he ended up having a coronary. That impact upon him was so powerful that he ended up having a heart attack. Anyhow, what transpired in April of 1954? A group of others, I hate the word alien, I don't even like the word ETs, but whatever term you care to use, they came in. There were 3 ships. They were golden in color. They were discs primarily, circular discs, but they were fat discs. They had a high dome on the top and they had a big dome on the bottom. And these golden metallic discs came in, 3 of them, and they circled over the runway. Made several passes. And Ike and this whole crowd are standing there with, mouths dropping open. We had some generals, we had some admirals, and we had a couple of church authorities there, and poor old Ike. And these guys circled around for a time, and then one of the ships came in and landed on the tarmac right in front of the hangar where the receiving party, the welcoming party, was located. And they had cameras set up. There were at least 4, maybe 5 cameras. Everything was on film. All of the sounds, they picked up every word that was said. One of the ships come over and lands right in front of the hangar. The other 2 ships stayed hovering over the runway during the entire process. The stories I've heard from people I trust in that the whole thing went 3 days. There was a lot of exchange. And your country hasn't been the same since. You talk about black government, shadow government. Ladies and gentlemen, you have no idea how damn black it is. The government you think you've got is not the government you've got. The government you think you had, the government that Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Hamilton, all the rest of those guys created 200 years ago is not the government you've got today. You do not have a democratic republic, good people, and I'm sorry to have to tell you that. You all know about Roswell. Well, let me tell you, Roswell was one little tiny event. For God's sake, there were 3 crashes in that area in New Mexico within 30 days. Roswell was only a tiny piece of it. There have been crashes going on all over the country and all around the world for the last 40 years, 60 years. We've been picking up bits and pieces of hardware all over the damn planet. The Navy retrieved a UFO out of the waters off San Diego in 1941. And if you talk about parts, well, we picked up bits and pieces. Ooh, we loaded them up. We took them off here and we took them off there. Took them at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. We've taken them at several places. And then, God bless them, we've taken the bodies and a couple of survivors off as well. Well, that's ancient history. But I'm saying, forgive me if I repeat myself, your government that you thought you had ceased to exist in 1947. And 1947 was also a year where we created the Central Intelligence Agency, we created the National Security Organization, and we also signed a pact called the UKUSA Pact, UK-USA. Now, this pact we signed in 1947 was not just an accident. At the end of World War II, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United States signed this pact, and we have been like this ever since. But the people in the United Kingdom, in England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, they don't know any more about it in reality than most people out there do. Because one of the things about the UKUSA Pact was the lid came down on all the secrets, particularly the secrets of their reality, and the lid has been down ever since. I have to laugh sometimes when I hear Nick Pope speaking out. Many of you know who Nick Pope is. He's a delightful young man. He's a bright young man. He worked for the Ministry of Defense in Britain for a number of years, and he had the UFO desk. And Nick is a lot like some of our people. They sit at the desk and they see a little bit, but they don't see most of it, because most of it never got to Nick's desk. So when he tells you that everything's been released, we're releasing it all over the place. Oh yeah, France has been releasing their classified material. The United Kingdom has been releasing their classified material, and the U.S. has begun releasing little bits and pieces of it. If you think they're releasing anything of real importance, forget it. The stuff that they're releasing is garbage. Nick, forgive me wherever you are at this moment. I'm not putting you down. Most of the stuff they're releasing is garbage. The only bit of information that came out of France recently that was of any information or of any value was a report they called the Cometa report. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with that. a number of retired French admirals and generals and scientists got together and put together a 30 or 40-page document called the Cometa Report about what they considered to be the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, which is a term I like to repeat from time to time, the UFO matter. And the Cometa Report said essentially that, damn it, we're not being told the truth, and we think it's time for everybody to fess up and get this information out. And the French were really ticked because, you know, they've had a chip on their shoulder from the very beginning that they've never really been shared with by the United Kingdom and the United States. Fighters over Europe in the 50s, and they were all over the damn place. We wondered then what they were all about. Well, bless his heart, Gordon now knows the answer. Oh, where were we? I was rambling, excuse me. We were talking about disclosure. There are lots of different things that have been happening. Let me get to some of this material here. One of the things that ticked me off the most is a little document known as Executive Order. I have in my fingers, I sound like one of those guys on TV. I have in my greasy fingers here an executive order, copy of it. This was signed by Slick Willie. Oh, excuse me, President Clinton. Slick Willie signed this on September the 29th, 1995. An executive order is something that you may not be aware of. An executive order is probably the most powerful piece of paper there is in our government. A president sits down, comes up with an idea, he has something he wants to do, he puts it on paper, he signs it, that becomes law. Nobody in Congress has to talk about it, nobody in Congress is asked to see it, nobody in Congress has to give approval to this, because when the president signs it, it becomes law. Now that in itself, good God, Washington, Jefferson, Hamilton, those guys are spinning in their graves, I think. The fact that we've reached this point where an imperial president can sit in his office at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and sign an executive order which becomes the law of the land, and you cannot argue with it. This particular one that Clinton signed in September of '95 wiped away every rule in the Environmental Protection Act. There were a bunch of guys over here, not too far away, at Groom Lake, Site 51, who were dying horrible deaths because they had been exposed to something, smoke, chemical, whatever, during their job. And these guys, their flesh was falling off their bodies, their skin was rupturing, the flesh was falling. They were in incredible pain, and they were dying. And their doctors and some attorneys tried to find out what it was that was causing this. If the doctors could find out what was causing it, they could possibly help those guys deal with this, and they could come up with some way of treating them. Well, not only did the government deny the request for information on what that material was that was killing these guys, those bastards in Washington even denied the damn facility didn't even exist. And this is after the Soviets had taken photographs from orbit proving the existence of Groom Lake and Site 51. And the Soviets were good enough to let us have photographs of the damn place. And yet your government in Washington says, oh, that doesn't exist. That place doesn't exist. No. And they wouldn't share any information, and those guys continued to die. I don't know how many of them passed away. I've lost track of it over the years. Let me tell you one other small thing. A retired scientist by the name of David Froning, who is alive and well and living outside of Flagstaff, Arizona today. 15 years ago, David Froning spoke at a conference which I was part of. And Froning graduated or completed his career working for Lockheed Martin, this vast corporation that's got their sticky fingers in so damn many things. David told us at this conference 15 years ago that before he retired, Lockheed Martin had, how the word he is, they had developed and were using hyperluminal flight. And it took some of us a little bit of a side there, and David, hyperluminal flight. Yeah, he said, faster than light. They've had it 40 years. Who has it? Well, he says, I want to say your government, but I can't say that with all honesty because he says it's classified. We've had hyperluminal flight for years, and you may know about it in another 20, 30 years when they fess up and tell you that what they can do, what they've accomplished, and what they can do, and what they have done. Now, another little tiny tidbit. This was from David Froning, a respected man, a scientist who spent all those years. Froning was involved with what he called modified field propulsion, a variable field form of propulsion. They were dealing with matter-antimatter conversion. They called it exotic field tension. And he said flatly, it modifies time and space. And it ends up, we've got luminal, hyperluminal flight. Now, some years ago, a guy by the name of Ben Rich retired from Lockheed Martin. And in the end of his career, Ben ran the skunk works over there at Lockheed. And there was a little jovial exchange between him and the guys in the audience out there. And Ben Rich said, you know, we can take E.T. home. I think the E.T. movie was out about that time. He says, we can take E.T. home. And a few of the guys in the audience says, Ben, what the hell are you talking about? Oh, he said, let me tell you, we've got stuff you wouldn't believe. We can take extraterrestrial home. So they said, look, what the hell is it all about? He goes over to the blackboard and he writes, unfunded opportunities. Okay. Well, the guys say, well, what the hell does that mean, Ben? Unfunded opportunities. So he goes over with the chalk and he circles the U and the F and the O. UFO. And then he had a big grin on his face and he left the podium. So we got these little bits and pieces. You talk about leakage. Arthur Clarke used to say, if you see advanced technology to a degree that's beyond what you can understand, people consider it as magic. Well, this is magic, guys. This was photographed in the infrared, and this is a city under the surface of Mars the size of Chicago. It's generating an enormous amount of heat. I'm sorry about the details of it are not that clear, but you can see the streets, blocks. This is an underground city on Mars that's fully active and filled with God knows who and what. Next picture, please. That's Phobos. That's the moon, 12 miles in diameter. The Soviets planned to land on it. Well, someone else said, no, you're not going to do that. But that is a picture of Phobos, which they've all concluded is an artificial satellite. Big secret? So's our own. Next picture. This photograph was taken by your own NASA Apollo 13 guys on their their trip to the moon, it didn't work out too well. And many of you may have heard rumors about the story, but Apollo 13 had a small nuclear device aboard. And they had been told by the guys that ran NASA that they were going to land on the surface, going to place this small nuclear device. And then when they all left and came back aboard and came back, they were going to detonate it and study the reverberations of this nuclear device, study the seismology of the moon, because they've been convinced for some years that the moon is basically hollow. It appears to be somewhat of an artificial satellite. Well, they plan to detonate this nuclear device, and the others said, no, you're not going to do that. We'll get back to that picture again, please. All right, I wanted to show you. This picture was taken by Apollo 13. The object you see there in the middle is 5 miles long. It's an artificial, I assume metallic object, probably crammed with guys. And that object followed our Apollo 13 all the way to the moon, around and back. Now, whether they were trying to make sure the Apollo 13 guys got home safely or what, whether they were the ones responsible for Apollo 13's little accident, which kept them from landing on the moon and placing that nuclear device, who knows? We may find out someday. But here you have an artificial object in orbit on the way to the moon, 5 miles long. Now, I've spent some time aboard aircraft carriers with my kid. I've been invited several times. My boy served on 4 different carriers, nuclear-powered Nimitz-class carriers. We have carriers with 5,000 men in the crew, 1,000 feet long, 150 aircraft, snack bars, dining rooms, accommodations, this and that. Can you imagine the accommodations on an object? I like to think that, there's McDonald's, bowling alleys, God knows what. I'm sure they have a fairly good life out there. Anyhow, aboard an object 5 miles long, I've tried, in the time I had, to do 2 things. To impress upon you the reality of the extraterrestrial presence, the ones I refer to as the others. I hate the term alien, I hate the term UFO. There are no UFOs. We've known what they are for years and years and years. Some of them are ours, some of them are theirs. There are no unidentified flying objects out there. They're all identified. I've tried to impress upon you the seriousness of it, the seriousness of the cover-up and the lies they've been telling you. The importance of why you need to know as much as you can know. And you need to be presented with the material, because damn it, you all deserve the truth. You have a right to know, and you have a need to know. Because you are the people that this whole damn thing is all about. Now, they're in our midst. That's an understatement. When I came in, I arrived yesterday. I've been running around here all day. There's an old friend sitting in the audience out here who I've known for years. He's currently with Defense Intelligence Agency. He's getting up to years, probably going to retire very soon. And I've met him many times. We shared a lot of information. There is another young man in the audience here who I will not point to because I can't see a damn thing with those lights, who is from National Security Agency, and he and my old friend were not aware of the other one being present here. But the one that's most redeeming and most exciting for me is there is a couple here who look like they're in the mid-40s. They look like a husband and wife. Nice-looking people. Very nicely appearance. As I said, their appearance is like a husband and wife. They're sitting together. Neither one of them were born on this planet. guys, they're in your midst. If you have dinner down here somewhere, you could, if you have dinner down here somewhere, you could be sitting next to one of them. There are two of them in the audience this afternoon, and I want to salute you. They're nice folks. They're as human in most respects as you and I are. They're all over the damn place. They're in our midst, and they are family. We're related to them because they were the ones that had a hand in establishing us as a hybrid race 100,000 years ago. And that hybridization is still underway, it's still happening, even as we sit here and speak. And it's simply this: you're not alone, and you have never been alone. And you have had, as I have learned over the years, an intimate interrelationship with advanced extraterrestrial intelligence from the beginning of human history. But what the thing I've learned, I guess, the most powerful thing, is that there is a God. Don't you ever doubt that. There is a supreme being. And you're all a part of that, because there is a spark of that divinity flashing and burning in every one of you. It's known as your soul, your immortal soul. I want to say something in closing. I want to try to communicate to you how much you people have meant to me over the years. I want you to know how much you all have meant to me over the years. Your support, your encouragement, and your warmth is only...
The Nibiru cover-up is really amazing, folks. As reported by Florida Today, a Delta IV rocket blasted off from Cape Canaveral in the midnight hours of August 19th. According to official reports, the unmanned platform, operating under the auspices of a shadowy organization known as the United Launch Alliance, carried a payload of satellites created to safeguard existing military communication satellites that were already in geosynchronous orbit above the Earth. Not many were aware of this launch, and even some among those who had advanced knowledge of it were questioning the payload. The actual payload was a next-generation infrared astronomical telescope, with technology far eclipsing its predecessor, which is NASA's IRAS, which in 1983 was launched into orbit to detect, image, and monitor the Nibiru system. The new platform, according to a former Cape Canaveral employee with connections to NASA, was designed and created in a compartmentalized and sanitized environment with teams of 3 to 5 engineers, each team manufacturing a specific component. The Delta IV lifted off without incident on a moonlight night, delivering its payload into geosynchronous orbit 22,000 miles above the Earth. The telescope will patrol an area of space relative to the southern ecliptic pole. Now, several Nibiru researchers and ostracized NASA scientists have said the Nibiru system is visible from the southern hemisphere. The platform's revolutionary infrared technology will allow NASA to track and image Nibiru as it swings around the sun and begins its deadly approach toward Earth. As I've said in my previous videos, NASA has known about this heavenly body for more than 30 years. This new technology will give them unprecedented ability to track the dark star. Not that they'll share information with the public, but we all know that already. This device employs advanced thermal imaging combined with conventional technology, giving NASA a complete but grim picture of what is approaching us. If you are one of those who are skeptical or who has an access to a telescope, you can point your telescope at the coordinates shown in this video. Now, this will give you a chance to see the satellite under optimal viewing conditions. Planet X will go down in hiding this knowledge from you because they do not care about you as individuals. How will you be impacted by this? Well, you're going to be impacted in so many ways it is difficult to fathom. But here are just a few of them. Multiple asteroid impacts, massive volcanic eruptions, enormous earthquakes, huge tsunamis, comet impacts, or a magnetic pole shift, which will leave the Earth vulnerable to all manner of deadly cosmic rays. The list is actually even longer. However, I'm sure that you get the point. What I would recommend is that you don't get hung up on the different names for these solar system interlopers, because they each have a slightly different backstory, which will be used by the enemies of truth to try and confuse people. What is important is that your government, specifically NASA, is continuously lying to you and actively trying to cover up massive changes to our solar system and consequently dramatic and life-altering changes to our own planet. There is a list of anomalies already happening to all planets in our solar system, including Earth, but they are minimizing this. Most people know about chemical trails. This is just one tool in your government's arsenal of tricks. NASA even admits to it. They even admit using lithium. What else is NASA up to? Well, they are cutting their live ISS camera feed because too many weird things are showing up and they can no longer explain them with credibility. So NASA uses misinformation and disinformation, excessive information, and censorship, just to name a few of their tricks. There are even rumors of mysterious and unexplained deaths of scientists and UFO researchers. If you don't believe me, start doing some research. Start taking photographs of the sun, or use a welder's mask or some sort of infrared filtering device that will make this heavenly body more visible to the naked eye. It's there, folks. This is not a fabrication or a figment of someone's imagination. It exists. I have been studying and investigating the Planet X scenario for more than 15 years now. I have looked at numerous images and videos of this incoming system, and I have interviewed a host of experts and investigators who are knowledgeable on this controversial subject. I can bear witness to you of the impact this system has on our own planet and the atmospheric changes that are taking place as a result of this incoming system. I have both seen and felt its presence. It has already affected myself and others in my community in personal ways, as I explained in my last video. Conspiracies, cover-ups, deception, and false flags. Countries and governments have a long history of using these tools, and if you think you are safe or are no longer living in an age when this could happen, you have already succumbed to their false propaganda and are actually helping perpetuate the conspiracy surrounding Planet X. Many of you know who Matt Damon is, an Oscar-winning actor who also happens to be an advocate for social and political injustice. Last year he spoke about the evilness of the world we live in. In some ways, his speech is indicative of what many of us are struggling with today, trying to decipher between right and wrong, between what is real and what is not, between truth and deception. So let's listen in.
I start from the supposition that the world is topsy-turvy, that things are all wrong, that the wrong people are in jail and the wrong people are out of jail, that the wrong people are in power and the wrong people are out of power, that the wealth is distributed in this country and the world in such a way as not simply to require small reform, but to require a drastic reallocation of wealth. I start from the supposition that we don't have to say too much about this, because all we have to do is think about the state of the world today and realize that things are all upside down. Now, if you don't think, if you just listen to TV and read scholarly things, you actually begin to think that things are not so bad, or that just little things are wrong. But you have to get a little detached and then come back and look at the world, and you are horrified. So we have to start from that supposition that things are really topsy-turvy. And our topic is topsy-turvy, civil disobedience. Now, as soon as you say the topic is civil disobedience, you're saying our problem is civil disobedience. That is not our problem. Our problem is civil obedience. Our problem is the numbers of people all over the world who have obeyed the dictates of the leaders of their government and have gone to war. And millions have been killed because of this obedience. We recognize this for Nazi Germany. We know that the problem there was obedience, that the people obeyed Hitler. People obeyed. That was wrong. They should have challenged, and they should have resisted. And if we were only there, we would have showed them. Even in Stalin's Russia, we can understand that. People are obedient. All these herd-like people. Remember those bad old days when people were exploited by feudalism? Everything was terrible in the Middle Ages. But now we have Western civilization, the rule of law. The rule of law has regularized and maximized the injustice that existed before the rule of law. That is what the rule of law has done. When in all the nations of the world, the rule of law is the darling of the leaders and the plague of the people, we ought to begin to recognize this. We have to transcend these national boundaries in our thinking. Nixon and Brezhnev have much more in common with one another than we have with Nixon. J. Edgar Hoover has far more in common with the head of the Soviet secret police than he has with us. It's the international dedication to law and order that binds the leaders of all countries in a comradely bond. That's why we're always so surprised when they get together. They smile, they shake hands, they smoke cigars. They really like one another, no matter what they say. What we are trying to do, I assume, is really to get back to the principles and aims and spirit of the Declaration of Independence. This spirit is resistance to illegitimate authority and to forces that deprive people of their life and liberty and right to pursue happiness. And therefore, under these conditions, it urges the right to alter or abolish their current form of government, and the stress had been on abolish. But to establish the principles of the Declaration of Independence, we're going to need to go outside the law, to stop obeying the laws that demand killing or that allocate wealth the way it's been done, or that put people in jail for petty technical offenses and keep other people out of jail for enormous crimes. My hope is that this kind of spirit will take place not just in this country, but in other countries, because they all need it. People in all countries need the spirit of disobedience to the state, which is not a metaphysical thing, but a thing of force and wealth. And we need a kind of declaration of interdependence among people in all countries of the world who are striving for the same thing.
So can we always count on our government to be upfront and honest with society? Sadly enough, we cannot. They have shown time and again that the little people do not matter. If you are seeking help, then you are on your own. It is the elite in society who will benefit the most when times get tough. On August 27th, Major Ed Dames, a former military intelligence officer and a remarkably accurate predictor of future occurrences, held an event in Las Vegas in which he exposed the truth about Planet X. In this event, he referenced that Planet X was real, it is inbound, and it will cause a tribulation. He said it appears to be a planet, but we are not sure exactly what it is. He said it will be seen in the sky by December of 2017 and will appear as big as the moon. It will interact with the magnetic field and weaken it. It will also interact with the sun directly, causing very large solar flares. There will be a 12-foot shift of the Earth, and the core will be heating up due to the interaction of Planet X with the sun. There will be substantial volcanic activity and catastrophic lightning storms. In all, he paints a bleak portrait of what to expect in our very near future. Researchers have mostly been silent on this subject for fear of retribution or of being silenced. But Ed Dames took a risk in revealing what he knows and is aware of with respect to the incoming Planet X. We are increasingly seeing individuals with direct connections to high-ranking intelligence and space agencies who are coming forward to warn the general public about what they know and have heard concerning the presence of an incoming system that will have a major impact on this planet and its inhabitants. Recently, one of our subscribers sent me a video that was published by a Nibiru observer on September the 12th. This video captures one of those rare moments in which a second sun is visible and is so convincing that one has to view this in complete wonderment. Now, if you look carefully at the object to the right of our sun, you will notice that it is emitting its own light source. It is diamond-shaped, or could be considered to be in the shape of a cross. I would have to speculate that what is being seen here by this observer is the Sun's Death Star companion Nemesis, although I have no way of saying with definitive proof that this is what we are seeing in this video. But considering its shape and dimensions and the amount of light emanating from this object, it certainly fits the description of a second sun. As Major Ed Dames had described in his presentation recently, he is grappling with what is coming our way. But whatever it is large, it is threatening, and will have a major impact on our planet. The observer in the previous video, which I just highlighted, mentioned that the second sun was only visible for a short duration.
September 2016, and I basically saw an object last night in the field. It was big, it had moons or planets around it. Now, it was only there for about 5-10 minutes, and then it faded away into the blackness of the chemtrails.
His observation is very similar to those of other skywatchers who were privileged to get a short glimpse of this incoming monster. One of those observers noticed while viewing the Soho website that a planet or star suddenly appeared between Venus and Mercury for a short duration and then disappeared just as suddenly as it had appeared. Notice how the left-right vectors off of Venus and Mercury align with this object and how the coronal discharge is affected. Also note the objects at approximately the 11 o'clock and the 1 o'clock position and how they react with the coming and going of this object. So whatever is present here is having an effect on the other planets in our solar system, which is what I have said all along as to its influence on other planets. The publisher of this video explains that he took 40 screenshots to make this short clip in UTC increments of 1 minute each. The evidence of an invading system is becoming more prevalent by the day. But I'm not going to try and convince you that this is real. That is not my objective. What lies in wait is in the eyes of the beholder. You either accept this as a condition of our existence on this planet. After all, if you are to believe the Sumerians and the Egyptians, then you are aware that this is not the first time that Planet X has made a passage across our bow. According to historical records, it has happened before and will happen again long after we are gone. Its passage is supposedly a part of the natural cycle of life on this planet and across the universe. All things are created and all things must die. But believe this, we are living in perilous times. You don't have to venture very far from home to realize that we face many dangers, some of them which are man-made, but many of which are the result of cosmic forces which are having a direct impact on this planet and our very way of life. So, as I have said before, your best defense is to keep looking to the skies, for therein lies the answers to your mortal and spiritual welfare.